Hey guys, today we want to talk all about what do we do with the old retirement plans when we leave an employer? What are our options? What should we be doing with it? How should we be thinking about these different options? And so we'll lay that all out today, and then we'll talk about two additional options that you might be thinking about if you do have a smaller plan as well. So stick around to find out. So we appreciate you joining us. If this is your first time, welcome. My name is Michael Foley. I'm a certified financial planner, a certified student loan professional. I'm also the son of two doctors and really developed Lifestyle Creep to really help the healthcare workers in our society to be really intentional in their finances, and hopefully through this more simplified approach to financial planning really help you to make some of these decisions from a more empowered position. So looking forward to diving into this with you today. So let's dive in. So what are the three options that we have, right? The three core options that we have when we leave our employer plan are we can just leave our 401k or 403b, we can move it to our new employer plan, or we can move it into a rollover IRA account. I deem that kind of the backpack account, right? And the reason I call it a backpack account is because it's like a backpack that you put on, and then every time you move from employer to employer, you throw the funds in there and you can move that into your personal IRA or your backpack account, okay? So let's break down. I want to talk through the pros and cons of all of these. And so, the first pro of leaving it is that it is the easiest. So if you're the type that you just want the simple solve, nobody's forcing you to move your plan, right? So typically you can just leave your plan. There are some instances where your employer will be closing down their old plan or something like that, and they'll force you to move it. But 9 times out of 10, we're going to see that not necessarily be the case. So you can absolutely leave it. But some of the cons to leaving it are that, we're going to have more accounts to manage. And so we see a lot of our clients that, they go through residency, they go through fellowship, then they go find an attending job, and then they move to a different attending job. We got 3 or 4 old accounts. So if we're not continuing to rolling it into, the rollover backpack account, or we're moving into the new plan, we're going to have just a ton of accounts to keep track of. And oftentimes, even if it's a few $1,000s, we can lose sight of that. And I don't want to lose sight of any money that you're putting away for retirement. So that's one of the cons to leaving it. The other con to leaving it is that we're going to have limited investment options. So usually when you sign up for your 401k or 403b or TSP, any of your employer retirement plans, they're going to give you a short list of investments. And so you have to pick from those investments. And usually most times the default is what we call a target date fund. And so you pick, when are you going to be 65, like a 2050 fund or something like that. And what those funds will do is they will start really aggressive, and then as they get closer and closer to retirement, they'll get more and more conservative, which overall sounds like a great game plan, but that's typically not a good recipe for a long-term retirement plan. But oftentimes it gets the job done for what we need when we have younger clients. But if we go in outside of those funds, are not typically known in the industry as being the best performing funds overall, because there's a multitude of reasons that is the case, and oftentimes they do come with other additional fees that could impact that as well. But they do usually have other options that you can select, but most of our clients are not actually going to be going in and rebalancing those. We can build a great portfolio for you and iron out, hey, this is what percentage we want any of these allocated for you, which we used to do with our clients. But then what we found is that people don't go back into there and readjust it. And since we're not the one managing it, it typically gets so wonky after a while that usually the target date fund ends up being the best for if we're not going to be managing it. But nonetheless, when we're keeping it in the 401k or the retirement space with your employer, we're going to have only a handful of options that we're going to have to choose from. So that is a downside to that. Okay. So let's say we don't want to leave it. We want to condense the accounts. And so now we want to condense the accounts. It's going to take more time investment. So whether we go option 2 or option 3, you're going to have to call over to the end company. You're going to have to request a check. They'll send the check over to you, and then you have to deposit that in option 2 or 3, right? But so let's talk through the pros of moving it into the existing retirement plan. So if you move it into your current employer plan, it keeps you so much more organized, right? We have everything in one place. So every time you move to a different employer, it's all at least in that account. But some of the downside is that you still have the limited investment options that you have, that you're still going to have that short list. And then also we have a lot less flexibility when it comes to looking at what we can do with those funds, because once you roll an old plan into the current plan, you can't touch those funds until you leave that employer. And obviously we can't touch those funds until 59 and a half, but if we wanted to do an IRA or wanted to have more discretion for what we wanted to do, you can't touch it until you leave that employer. So it's locked up until you terminate employment. So that's one other thing. And then the last thing is that obviously it's going to take time to complete this, right? You're going to have to call over to your old company's manager, call them and have them issue a check, and they send it to your house and you deposit it, right? So that's just going to come with the territory with two or three here. So really, it's nice that it's trimming down the account number for you, keep nice and organized. But at the end of the day, we're still having the limitation on the investment options. But this could be a great solve for many of our clients that maybe have a smaller account size that want to just move it into their employer plan and just move on. There's nothing wrong with that, but just know the cons that come along with that. Okay. And so the last option is moving it over into what we call a rollover IRA that I'm calling the backpack account, right? So pros to having that is that it keeps you nice and organized. Like I said, anytime you move from employer to employer, you can just put those funds into your backpack, and then you have no real limit on what you're investing in. We can invest and we can have actual oversight on the investment accounts for you, so you're not limited to just a handful of funds that they're maybe pushing for you to invest in on your employer plan. And so we have a lot more discretion for how we can invest that, and then an advisor can actually keep an eye on that for you, right? If it's your employer plan, there's not really an advisor really looking at your specific situation and making sure that it's staying on track. And let's say a fund is not doing well, or they plucking and replacing it, maybe they would. We could do that in a rollover IRA. We can't necessarily do that in an employer plan. So the other pro to having a rollover IRA is that it gives you the flexibility to change your mind down the line, right? So if you roll over an old IRA that maybe have a good lump sum in that account that we want to move over and we want to have the discretion, but maybe we need to move it into an employer plan in the future, or we want to be able to do what we'll tell the backdoor Roth strategy or things like that, you have discretion. You can move that. It's not locked out for you by any means. So if we want to move that into different types of investments, or we want to move that back into your employer plan, you have total flexibility for how you want to do that. So whereas if we have it in the employer plan, those funds are locked up until you terminate employment with your current employer. So just something to keep in mind, okay? Now, there are cons to having the rollover IRA though. And so the big thing to be thinking about is obviously the time commitment is going to be pretty comparable to moving it to your employer plan, but we'll be able to help navigate that when we're moving our clients' funds over. We can hold your hand through that process. But one of the downsides is that you can't do what we call the backdoor Roth IRA. So if you haven't watched our video on what the backdoor Roth IRA is and how to do that, please watch that, and we'll put the link up in this video as well, so you can check that out. But when we have an old IRA, it's an individual retirement account, and so it takes the retirement money and puts it in a different category. So it doesn't allow you to do the backdoor Roth IRA strategy that we may be looking at for some clients, right? And so the backdoor Roth, like we talked about in that video, is something that it was like all the rave several years ago when we couldn't get any money into a Roth type of account for our clients over a certain income threshold. But now most of our clients in their new employer plans can make Roth contributions directly into their employer plan regardless of their income level. And so it's definitely alleviated the need to do the backdoor Roth, but that is something that is a downside, that if you have it in a rollover IRA, we can't do that. And so oftentimes if we are wanting to try to maximize that Roth contribution or try to get that extra $7,000 that you can get into that account, we want to move that into your employer plan. But if we're able to do Roth through our employer and that's going to be sufficient for what we need to be saving for retirement, then there's really no need and not necessarily a worry on that. So those are kind of the pros and cons of the different options that you have. One of the things too is that we have some clients, I talked about a couple different options for if we have just a really low account balance. So let's say we have $2,000 or $3,000 in an account. A couple options that we can think of is, one is just we do see some people cashing that out and just saying, hey, I just want that out. Usually we do not advise that. Even if it's just a couple $1,000, you're gonna get hit with a 10% penalty if you take it out before 59 and a half, and you're gonna have to pay taxes as if you earned it. And so usually that's not advised, even if it is a small amount. Even if it's a $2,000, that's $200 that you could have not had paid laden penalties, right? So that's usually an option we like to steer away from. The other option that we have is to convert some into a Roth IRA. So we can go right from your old retirement account and you can move that directly into a Roth IRA. It doesn't matter the income limits or anything like that. But the caveat is you have to move, when you do that, you have to pay taxes on whatever you convert over into that. So if we have that $2,000, we move it into the Roth IRA, you're gonna have to pay taxes on that in this year, but there's no 10% penalty on that. And then that money can stay invested and grow over time completely tax-free for you into retirement. So usually for that smaller amount, oftentimes the backdoor Roth is gonna be a good strategy, or not even the backdoor Roth, just directly a conversion into a Roth, or potentially just moving that into your option two, moving that into your existing employer plan to trim down the account size, because we want to try to keep things as simple as possible as we can, have as much flexibility as we possibly can in your overall plan. And so hopefully this has been helpful to break down your different options that you have. And so let us know if any other questions come up. If you're wondering what to do with your old retirement plan and need some guidance on that, want to just break down the pros and cons in your specific situation, our team would love to help you out. So feel free to reach out, and we'd love to come alongside you and see how we can assist.